Jesus has become famous. Not so much because of His teaching, but because of His miracles. Healing multitudes, raising up the sick. And when He comes to His hometown, to the place where He has set up His headquarters, not His hometown, but His headquarters, He goes to synagogue. Very different organization from the temple, but a place where you could gather for worship, a place where the service might last 5 hours. And as His custom was, Jesus went to synagogue. Do you suppose when Jesus went to synagogue, He ever heard anything taught that He'd just shake His head at and say, "Where'd they get that? It's not in the Scripture as I understand it." Do you ever suppose when He went to synagogue, He heard people disputing among themselves rather than praising God? But every Sabbath He went to the synagogue. And this time they are thrilled when He comes in, and they want the hometown boy to read the Scripture. If you're picked to read the key Scripture of the day, you're really somebody. And the lectionary text for that day was the prophet Isaiah. And he reads, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me." And he says, "My ministry is going to be patterned after the year of Jubilee, when debts were forgiven, and lands were restored, and burdens were lifted." And it's a messianic scripture. It's hard to find any scripture in the Old Testament that points more to who the Messiah is than that text in Isaiah that Jesus read in their hearing. And after he'd finished reading, he rolled the scroll back up, handed it to the attendant, sat down and began to teach. And he said, "Today this scripture is fulfilled in your midst." And they said, "Wow, that's good preaching." There's no indication from Luke's account at all that anybody disagreed when Jesus said, "This text talks about me." They were thrilled with it. But then Jesus said, "I know what you're thinking. You want me to do some of the miracles here that I did other places. You're going to quote that old proverb, 'Physician, heal thyself,' to me." And he said, "I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to give you an Old Testament lesson, one that you're familiar with, one from 1 Kings 17, the other from 2 Kings 5. He said, "In all of Israel during the time of 3.5 years of no rain and famine, only one widow was ministered to by Elijah the prophet. And she was from the region of Sidon," which means she's outside of Israel. And as I commented when I read the text, it means she's from the area where Jezebel was from. One of the wickedest queens to ever sit beside the throne and produce great wickedness in the nation, and would still have been recognized for that in Jesus' day. And only the widow outside of Israel was ministered to by God's man. And during the time of the ministry of Elisha, when he did twice as many, 2 for 1 of every miracle Elijah did, there were lots and lots of lepers, but only one of them was healed during Elisha's ministry. And he was a Syrian, a captain of the opposing forces. Now that might not make a lot of sense to us, because we see they immediately got furious with him. The word that Luke uses when he says they were filled with wrath means they were out of their minds with anger. And we wonder, what's the big deal? The big deal was Israel said, God has chosen us as His people, and we're the only ones that He blesses with His blessings. And if you want in on the blessings of God, you've got to come in to Israel to get the blessings of God. And Jesus said, during these two incredible times of national calamity, the only two people that were ministered to by the choicest of God's servants, Elijah and Elisha, were two foreigners, two outsiders, two heathens, two non-believers. And they would have understood immediately that Jesus was saying, this gospel of the kingdom that I have identified myself as Messiah in your hearing is for everybody, not just for the Jews. He made extraordinary claims for the gospel, for the good news. And to the folks that were hearing that sermon that day, good news was not good news. And they said, we're not going to put up with this. And so they literally pushed him out of the synagogue, herded him like a dumb animal to the edge of the cliff, and we're going to push him over and kill him. But he passed through their midst. They thought they were in control. Jesus was in control. And His message was, this gospel of the kingdom is for everybody. Not just for us, not just for the Jews, but for the people outside and some of the wickedest, meanest, nastiest people. The gospel is for them.